Good day, dear students. Welcome to our course. My name is Aina Simpson. My contact number is 081 2457456. My email address is ainasimpson@gmail.com, all in small letters. You can reach me during these hours, 6 o'clock in the evening to 8 o'clock in the evening. That will be the appropriate time. Welcome to the most important subject in your teaching career, that is now counseling and learner support. I would like to urge each one of you to be a hardworking, dedicated, and self-driven student in your studies. So you need to take care of your own studies. This presentation will take you through the subject content as well as common mistakes done by students as noticed in previous examinations as well as assignments. The purpose of this presentation is to highlight key areas of the subject content, to improve and strengthen response to questions, how you respond to questions, and also to touch base on the examination expectations. What is expected of you in examination? Emphasize the importance of studying the entire study guide. You are required to study the whole study guide. We do not choose which unit to use and which unit you need to know better than the others, and also to set a strong foundation for examination preparation. As we study, we also learn how to study for examination, because when you study for examination, you need to remember what you have studied. If you decide to memorize the work, when you are to set for examination, you might as well not recall what you have studied because you just did a rote learning. The subject overview is to understand the well-being of the children and adolescents to enable you to help them. So when we look at this subject, you need to understand the learners or the children you are working with. And only when you understand them, then you are able to assist them. This subject content should achieve a holistic view of teaching practices and learning. You need to learn how to convey the information to children, how the children should learn, and this is the entire component of what you need to know. Educational institutions need to counsel and support learners. When we are talking of educational institutions, these are schools and other areas where they need to counsel and support learners, just not to leave them unattended, to promote emotions and skills that enable learners to benefit most from their studies. If learners are assisted, they will benefit from what they are studying, because if they are not assisted, they will definitely not know how, and also they won't learn. So the skills are needed also to look into their emotions, whether they are happy or they are moody, they are bored, and so on. This subject helps learners to understand themselves better, discover personal abilities, as well as to develop goals. So when you are studying counseling and learner support, you are not there to tell children what to do. You are there to guide them so that they understand their personal abilities and also to develop their own goals in life. Not for you to say, you should do this, you should do that. That will not help them. Work assessed are not only aimed at assessing module factual knowledge, but also assessing the ability of the student to apply knowledge in practical situations. When we are looking at the assessment, we are not only assessing the work which is in the module, but also what the students are able to do and in a practical form. Students need to know the exit learning outcomes and learning activities in each unit, as this will prepare students towards any form of assessment, which are assignments as well as the examinations. Our book has, or our study guide has 8 units, and in those 8 units there are exit learning outcomes for each unit, which you need to know. Know the meaning of the action verbs in the study guide in order to understand the question demand. In this way, students will know what is expected of them when answering the questions. So if you are to answer a question, first of all, these action verbs, they are very important for you to understand, so that you look at or you provide the necessary answer required by the questions, and that will also guide you to provide the demand of the question in full. So this means when you are asked, for example, to describe, or you are asked to discuss, those are 2 different things. You need to understand them. That is what is meant by action verbs. The introduction to our unit or to our module is, the study guide is divided into 8 units, as I mentioned earlier. These are the approaches to and the phases of counseling of learners. We look at basic counseling and Namibian referral procedures, the holistic approach to learning support, how to counsel and support learners regarding some life skills, key challenges experienced by learners, the practice of good discipline with children, nutrition, nutrients, and related health disorders. And the last unit is about the prevention and treatment of learners affected and infected with HIV and AIDS. Those were the 8 units that we are going to look at. The key areas to emphasize on during studies, we are looking at different approaches. With the different approaches, we have holistic approach. We have holistic approach which looked at a whole person, not part of the person. What is it that you need to understand about that? When we look at holistic approach, we are looking at a whole child. We are not deciding what part of the child we need to do. We need to study. And then we also look at problem-solving approaches. That is another approach, a practical model of finding solutions on problems. The problems are there, and now we need to find solutions to those problems. And then we have 7 steps problem solving cycle. It has been noticed in the previous examination that most students never had an idea of what each system means besides mentioning them. So this means when you asked a question about 7 steps of problem solving, you need to know them in a correct order so that you understand them, because you cannot start solving the problem if you haven't identified the problem, and you follow them in those orders. And this is what was mentioned at the beginning, that the presentation will also assist you in ways of how to study as well as how to approach the questions. Then we are looking at should you have a question of that. At this point, you can be asked to explain, describe, discuss, this by using relevant and appropriate examples. It is important to know the steps in the correct order as well as phases of counseling process. So this means when you are to answer a question on the seven cycle of problem solving, you need to know them in the correct order. The same way, if you are to be asked about the phases of counseling, then you need to know them in the correct order, because the same way applies to seven problem solving. You cannot talk about phases of counseling process if you cannot put them in the correct order. The same way, if you identify the problem, you can't start monitoring the problem if you haven't worked on it. What are you monitoring? Those are the areas that we need to keep in mind. Importance of counseling support groups. Why the counseling support group is important. It is important because it involves everybody. It involves a child, it involves the teacher, it involves the parents, and this needs to be understood. Identification of children need counseling. We also need to look at children who are in need of counseling. For example, when a child is in need of counseling, we are looking at certain warning signs. The warning signs could be in the area of emotional. The child is always angry, or the child is always not happy to be with others, or the child is always beating others and so on, or the child is always crying. Then we are looking at behavior. The behavior, this is where the bullying also coming in. Possibly this child does not want to play with others. Everywhere the child is, then other children will be crying, or the other children will not be happy because this particular child is around them. And then we have also social signs, where a child would possibly distance himself or herself, not want to be with others. So in such a way, you can then identify that a child who behaves in a certain way may be in need of counseling, as well as physical. Sometimes you will find that a child has bruises all over the body, and that already tells you something is not right with the child. And then we look at referral procedures in Namibia that are part of types of special education. What is it that we need to know in order to work out the referral? So this basically, we are looking at the needs of the child, and where, now that we have found out that the child has these needs, what do we do with the child? There are schools where we can refer this child. So we have categories of special schools that cater for different needs of children. The types of special schools, educational schools, these are found under referral procedures in Namibia. We have schools that are catering for different needs. For example, needs for learners who are slow in learning. Then we have learners who are visually impaired. We have learners who are intellectually impaired. We have learners who are who have hearing impaired, either hard or completely hearing impaired. And further reading is required on these two areas, so that you are not confused of what need to be understood. We should not only stick to what we have in our study guide, we also need to go out of our way to find sources that also assist us, so that we have a better understanding of what it is. Yes, you can stick to your book, but if you read more out of what we have, then you will definitely have more information than what the limited information we have has. And now again, should we asked to explain or describe or discuss. By using these relevant and appropriate examples depend on the question. It is important to understand the question well before trying it out. It's very important because that will then help you to score better marks and also to provide the good demands of the question. Then we are looking at domains of human development. With the domains of human development, we are looking at a whole person. What is it that we are looking at? We are looking at social, we are looking at physical, social, physical, emotional. All these are part of human development. And then we have IEP, features and procedures. IEP is Individualized Educational Program. We have learners who are in need of assistance. Such learners, you can then develop a program for an individual child. There are some areas where you could have 2-3 children in the class who are possibly have similar problems, but in most cases, it requires an individual program. So this individual program, again, you need to know this and do this in the correct order. So you need to request a special education eligibility evaluation. You need to evaluate the child. An eligible evaluation is done. You initiate a meeting to talk about what your findings were. And then after that is done, you need to monitor the progress of this IEP program that you have developed. And after that, you need to re-evaluate what the child is doing with the program being developed. Stakeholders and their roles, who should be involved in the planning of the Learner Support Program IEP. There are people who are involved in, and this we call them stakeholders. This is now a teacher, parents, and the regional school counselor. These are the people who should be part of this program. Yes, you can do it as a teacher on your own, but then they also need to give their input. They also need to see what is being done for a child, because the whole idea is to assist the child. At this point, you can be asked to explain, describe, discuss this by using relevant and appropriate examples. Depend on the question, and it's important to understand the question well. Again, we are sent back, and for you to develop the IEP, you must do it in the correct order, not just anything you think of that can work. Develop emotional intelligence. It's also one of the important areas where you need the child to understand himself or herself, and this includes now the self-awareness. The child needs to know himself or herself. The child needs to have empathy and sympathy with the other people. So this is quite important, and you need to read more on this also. Reasons, consequences for substance abuse by learners. Why learners use substances? So in other words, there should be a reason why a child should start drinking, why a child should start smoking. What are those reasons, and what are the consequences after drinking and after smoking? What comes thereafter? Those are the consequences that we need to know. This could be some of the contributing factors: individuals, family, friends, and peers. Other reasons. Now, for a child to do that, sometimes it's just the own making of the child. Sometimes perhaps the child is coming from a family which does the smoking and the drinking and all that, or it's because of friends, peer pressure, and perhaps some other unknown reasons. But the person who does it, I'm sure the person should be aware of why the person is doing it. Effects of substance abuse on learners. So now that after the child is involved in this, what then happen after? The effects could be the dropout of school, the drop down of the results, and all that. Those are the effects of substance abuse on a learner. And then again, we are reminded that we need to understand the questions before we try them out. Reasons for drop out of school. There are quite a lot of reasons that caused a child to drop out of school. We are living in the environments where children are leaving school for no reason. Sometimes they have no reason, sometimes they have reasons, and these reasons are quite vast. And this reason most of the time depends on where the child lives, because if the child lives in town, there are quite a lot of areas which contribute to the child not to be in school anymore. And when the child is attending school in rural areas, again, it could be the distance, it could be the language barriers, it could be that there are no resources. All this could contribute to the child drop out of school. Strategies to eliminate dropout in school. So the school then need to come up with ideas and ways how to stop, although it's not going to be stopped completely, just to minimize the dropout of school. The school need now to come up with ideas and ideas to help to minimize the school dropout. Because talking alone, it might not help. Perhaps these children are dropping out of school because there is poverty, they are always hungry, and then if that's the case, possibly the school may come up with a soup kitchen or something that will keep a child at school and will make a child to always want to go to school. Poverty impact on learners' learning ability and school performance. Poverty has also its own issue. It has a hand on the learner's learning abilities and the school performance. Yes, who of us can study when you are hungry? Who of us can be in school when you know if you stay at school up to 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock, you walk home and still will not find food? So those are some of the things. Substance abuse, reasons for the effect on learners. Okay, this we mentioned it. And then again, the relevancy of the questions before we try it. It's very important to understand the question. Then we have the unacceptable discipline techniques. There are techniques used in classrooms and are very unacceptable, reason being that they cause harm to learners. And these are some of the examples, like harsh punishment, corporal punishment, shaming, and labeling. Now, you give a harsh punishment to a child, for example, to either dig a hole or to carry a certain bag or carry a big stone or so on. You want to beat a child, that is physical punishment, which is quite discouraged. And then shaming a child by saying so bad things about the child in front of others, or you label the child to say you don't learn, you like what, you, it's always you and all that. So it's not quite good to say that, and these are unacceptable discipline techniques. Yes, perhaps one may think that by so doing you are disciplining the children, but in any case you are harming them, because it is not allowed. And also at the end of the day, these children might drop out of school because they will not feel comfortable being called names or being shouted at or being beaten or being given this harsh work all the time. And then we have acceptable discipline techniques. Remember, we talked of the unacceptable. Now we are talking of the acceptable ones. So what are the acceptable ones? These techniques can be used in schools. No learner will be harmed when used. So, for example, if you tell a child that if you behave this way, or you for example, you put a child to sit in a certain corner while others are playing, you do not allow this child to play with others because of what he or she has done. So the next day, this child is not hurt, but the child will realize that if I continue doing this, then I will not be allowed to play with others. And you need to take away exactly what the child like, so that it also sends a message in the child's mind to know that if I do this, I will be punished, or I will not be allowed to play, or I will not be allowed to do this. And then that is how a child learns. And that those are the discipline, the acceptable discipline techniques. Consequences of discipline techniques. What are the consequences? So the consequences, we have either the acceptable one or the unacceptable one. With the unacceptable ones, it may force a child to lose self-control. The child will not be happy. The child may drop out of school, because all the time the child is angry and thinking of what the teacher does to him or her. And the consequences on the acceptable ones, it motivates a child in a way to, or it discourages a child not to do what is unacceptable. So the child will start improving also his or her schoolwork if that was going down, because the child will realize that if I do this, then this is where I'm getting, and if I stop this, then this is where I am heading. The strategies for teachers to deal with bullying in schools. There are also different ways how a teacher can deal with bullying, because it's not only beating that helps a child. You can find different ways to help the child, so that the child also realizes that I need to learn. This is done for my own good. And then we have practices that support physical health. These practices are personal hygiene, health exercise, rest and recreation, health eating habit, and abstinence from harmful substances and other activities. So the child needs to be clean body-wise. The child needs to exercise so that the child's brain can also function well. The child needs to rest. The child needs to eat good. The child needs to stay away from substance abuse. For substances could be alcohol, substances could be cigarettes and other activities. Ways to support learners with eating disorders. We have children who have eating disorders. Eating disorders comes in two ways. We have anorexia and we have obesity. We have children who eat almost every other second, and then boom, they go. They are big. Their bodies grow big because they eat everything and anything and every time. And that is also a disorder, eating disorder. And then we have children who do not want to eat at all. And this is now anorexia, where they will become like stick persons, that they are just grow smaller and smaller and smaller. So what are the dangers posed by eating disorders? And what are the problems caused by the eating disorders? Right, the danger and the problems. So we are looking at both, being it obesity where a child eat more, and anorexia where the child eat less or the child don't eat at all. So both brings a child to sickness, and this is being discouraged. So the child need to eat healthy food, and the child need to eat during the appropriate time. Being it the obesity or being it the anorexia where the child does not want to eat at all. So if that is done, then we are helping the child not to become that person who is too fat or the person who is too thin. And also, by so doing, you help a child to avoid getting sick from different sicknesses that are related to the eating disorder. And how to support learners with eating disorders. Think of what could be the challenge to a learner who has eating disorder. Now we need to look at the two areas, being it obesity or being it anorexia, where a child eating too much or where the child eating less, and then we try to help this person. It's always good to sit down with the child as well as with the guardian or the caretaker, the caregiver, so that they understand what the child is going through, because in most cases these are the people who supply, who provide food to the children. And also the child who does not want to eat, the parent should understand what would be the cause in the end. Professional intervention and school prevention programs. There is need to look at programs that could stop or help the situation on eating disorder. It's very important to have the professional intervention. Now here, professional intervention, we can possibly invite doctors, we can invite dietitians, so that they speak to a child and the caregiver, so that they understand what is the danger if they continue doing whatever they have been doing, being it obesity or being it in the group of anorexia. That's very important. And then when we answer these questions, we need to understand the questions, because I previously remember there were questions about eating disorder, but there were specific areas that were asked. And most students did not get that information. Although they were reading, for some reason they skipped the information and they provided answers which were not answering the questions. In that way, you will not get marks. For example, if you are asked to talk about what are the problems of being obesity, and you start talking of obesity is when a person is too fat, and that has nothing to do with the question. Therefore, it is very, very important that you understand the question. Read the question 100 times in order to understand what the content of the question is and its demand. And we are coming to the last unit, which is talking about HIV. So we have the impact of HIV and AIDS on a community. Talk about challenges caused by HIV. So in this area, we have heard of this word long back, HIV and AIDS. Now we are looking at what is the impact of HIV and AIDS on a community. You have to group this. You have now a group of HIV and you have the community. So what is the problem there? So looking at that, if you have a person possibly sick, and this person is a breadwinner in the house, who is going to do the work? Who is going to work? And that is how the community is going to suffer. And that is the impact. That is now what has been caused by HIV and many other areas. And HIV to the community also, so it's the same, the impact of the HIV to the community. We are looking at the rights of children living with HIV. So children living with HIV, they do have rights. And now as they have rights, they need to be respected. They have rights to attend school, they have rights to food, they have rights to any other rights any other person has. So it's quite important that we also look at them as human beings and with their human rights. So they have rights simply because they are human. Any person, any human being has the right simply because you are a human being. That's how far it goes. Difficulties faced by AIDS orphans. Children who are orphaned because of AIDS, they have difficulties. Some of them, they are left with nobody to look after them. Some of them, they are left with no money to take care of them, and quite a lot of of things happen. Think of different situations often find themselves in after diagnosed with HIV, and most of them are being discriminated. As soon as another person learned that this is their situation, then they become discriminated, which is not correct, or which is not good. Care and support of children affected and infected with HIV. What can be done to assist learners affected and infected with HIV? A lot can be done. We are looking at physical part, where they need food, they need clothing. Then we also look at emotional. They need to be taken care of, they need to be talked to, and we have social, quite a lot need to be done. And that will help them not to think of the danger they find themselves in. So far we have come to the end of our presentation. I hope the information will assist you when you are to complete or study for your examination. And examination, we have only one presentation. We do not have examination scope. As I indicated earlier from the beginning of the presentation, that this will help you to study your whole module. Should you have questions, you are welcome to contact me at the given contact details at the given time. Your examination will be at 2.5 hours, and the format, it will be all types of questions that you can expect. And then the verb in questions hold the key to better performance, because it indicates the level of thinking and therefore the way of structuring answers. It's very important that we look at the verbs when we answer the questions. You are required to pass with 50%, which is calculated by 60 of the examination mark and a 40 of the semester, which is continuous assessment. In this case, it's the assignment itself. And then from examination, a sub minimum of 50% must be attained in the examination, since your question paper is out of 120. So at least in exam, score 60 marks. 60 marks is now calculated as 50% that you need, plus the continuous assessment, which will give you the 50 marks of pass when it has been converted. The examination covers different types of questions, such as open-ended questions that examine the students' understanding and application of knowledge, skills, and ideas about counseling. Examination will be online unless things change otherwise. Students are kindly reminded to proofread answers before upload them to avoid losing marks. And you are asked to avoid the following. Students are expected to make use of correct font size, Times Romans 12, Arial 10, not 14 and more. Also avoid using colors. Some students in the past make use of different colors. A heading has a different color. When they want to express a certain point, then they bold these letters or they use a bigger font size. That is not allowed. Serious spelling mistake should be looked into. Long unnecessary statements and sentences should be discouraged, and misinterpretation of questions with limited answers were also discovered, and that should be discouraged too. Feel free to contact me should you have some challenges regarding examination preparation, but you should not call me in the week you are writing. I will not answer your questions. So those are the times and the days that you are expected to reach me Good luck with your studies. I wish you all well. Thank you.